Hi everybody, it's me, Jacobo, and I wanted to shoot this video, perhaps the last video of this year, to present pretty much my findings from my trip in Mexico. This video is indeed is going to be a follow-up of that first video that I did where I was explaining my rationale for going to Mexico, to the south of Mexico, and why I was going and the base for my research there, which was to explore this theme that I have been researching which is on what I call the post-Western world. What I mean by post-Western is having these minorities achieving that sense of equal parity and standing uh, against that the established cultural understanding. And I went to Oaxaca pretty much following a conversation that I had with a friend that I met earlier this year when I was in Mexico. We talked about this post-Western world idea, and then she told me about Oaxaca and the dynamics that are having with the indigenous minorities and the need for equal representation and the way and how they're using art expression, which is very rich and widely celebrated. How they're using art to push for that equal representation. I decided to follow through that thought, and especially because my friend, who is as a leading public figure in Mexico and across Latin America, she has a strong interest to promote Mexican art. And when we were discussing about perhaps doing a project or evaluating a project, for me it was very clear that I wanted to do a project representing artists that had some very authentic value rather than artists that were doing works that I see elsewhere. And not to discredit the Mexican artists that are doing similar works that you find elsewhere, but for me, I'm curious to understand that authentic nature of true Mexican art and understand the reasons why. And so I went to Mexico to try to understand, and yeah, I was absolutely surprised that so I flew to Oaxaca, and that place fascinates you from the moment you get out of the airport. It's very colorful. Is just, how can I best describe it? Oaxaca is a small city. I think it's more like a big village, a big town rather than a small city. And so it's a small town. I won't say not because of it's underdeveloped. It's because the culture is rather closed. By I mean is that you don't necessarily see so much, like I would say, like standard influence. That's the best way to do. I won't say foreign influence, but I would say standard, because when you go to Mexico City, it's pretty much it's very cosmopolitan, and you don't see that in Oaxaca. In Oaxaca, is very, 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 very authentic. It's very rich in that local folklore, and you see it from the moment you get out of the airport, and it's very colorful. And also, I went pretty much soon after Dia de Muertos, which is the Day of the Death, and which is kind of like the most iconic visual expressions out of Mexico. When I was in the city, there were still celebrations, and there was some sort of band playing every night, and there was music on the streets everywhere, and people dressed up like all sorts of uh, characters on the streets dancing pretty much every night. And I asked her if it was part of the celebration. Told me like, no, there's pretty much in Mexico, in Oaxaca, there's always some sort of like a festival or celebration of some kind or whatever. To pretty much people are looking for all sorts of excuses to continue the party, and that is true. Is the place is a very happy place. It's very uplifting. It's a place that if I recommend it, you're feeling down for XYZ reason, fly there, and believe me, you'll feel a different person when you get out. It's very uplifting. It's very colorful, very rich in all senses, in color, in a spectacle and taste. The food is surreal. Is indeed one of the most celebrated cuisines in Mexico, Oaxacan cuisine, and the famous moles and tamales and etc. are you eat them there, and I just it's just amazing. I had a fantastic time there, and the reason I went there is because Oaxaca is well known for that revolutionary spirit uh, that dates back from the from the revolution in the early 1900s. The history of, especially the history of modern Mexico, is fascinating, and I had to read it through to understand the things that I was saying, because indeed the works that you see on the streets do date back from the Mexican Revolution, and even before that, there are dynamics that has not changed pretty much since the Spanish Conquista, and that uprise of the minorities to date back to, or root back from these events. I first saw it when I went earlier this year, and I was in Mexico, and I saw the works from Diego Rivera, especially, like even though Frida Kahlo and so on. But for me, the reference for art, if I were to single out, in my opinion, one of the greatest Mexican artists is by far Diego Rivera, because he had a very powerful social message, and you clearly see it in Oaxaca, where he was coming from. In Oaxaca, you understand that the works that you see on the streets, and these are like a very young artists now that are taking on the streets doing all this work, and you realize that what they're fighting is for that representation that it was kind of like always promised, right? I mean, after the revolution and the formation of the new republic, there was always an understanding that all society is going to equally represent and give uh, uh, equal access and equal rights to absolutely everybody. But for many reasons, that didn't turn out to be the case. And unfortunately, the indigenous people, although culturally are quite well celebrated, when it comes to society, they do stand with a clear disadvantage, and that's very clear. And that's what the reason why you have all these different uprisings, particularly coming out of Oaxaca. And the works that I saw there were, especially coming from the young artists, were really uh, portraying that fight for equal representations. The work that you see, so when you go to the streets of Oaxaca, what you see is a lot of works that are deeply rooted on indigenous culture. And I discussed with artists that had the opportunity to meet one of the artists, the street artist, which the works really blew my mind the moment I saw them on the streets, because most of the works that you see are, which is quite interesting, most of the work that you see are very kind of like this is kind of like engraved, like a black and white, very COVID inspired. On a footnote, that's quite interesting, because when you study Chinese contemporary art, you realize that COVID also had a big influence on the avant-garde artists of China of the 1980s, and you see that the same aesthetic of COVID is also influencing these young artists, these young street artists in Mexico. I recommend you to look at this particular group of artists called Subterráneos and compare it with the works of I'll probably put the footage on the video, like the comparisons of the different artists, because I found it quite interesting. But when I was walking around, I found this particular artist that really stood out, which is Samaela Aguero. And what I like about the work is there were two things. One is the symbolism of the kids. He's using a lot of like a kid imagery. Not in all the works, but in most of the works, he's using a lot of kids that are either of indigenous or minority background. And the other thing that he uses is the symbolism of the crow and the Basquiat crown. And I actually had the opportunity to have coffee with him. We sat down and I asked him about all this, and then on the conversation we kind of explored the topic that indeed nobody's actually born equal, and even though I mean the institutions, the political institutions, aim for for that sense of equality for XYZ reasons, from power struggles to corruption to greed and interest. That is not necessarily secured, and unfortunately, that's the reality in Mexico. The indigenous groups are not necessarily equally represented in terms of opportunity, and therefore the uprise, the natural uprise, and the spirit of resistance that the Oaxacan people live and that the Oaxacan people have. I found this very good article in a Jacoban article. I'm going to put it on the screen. That explains pretty much the dynamics that you find in Oaxaca. Pretty much summarized really well what I saw. Then people that know me well, I'm not a collector of aesthetics. I'm a collector of intellect, and I really want to. I'm always very curious about the underlying reason for the works, and in Oaxaca was as an experience. So yeah, it was a beautiful trip. I really enjoyed it. I really wanted to share with you my thoughts about the trip. I absolutely recommend everybody to go to that region. And yeah, I mean, I would love to do a project in Hong Kong. I have been discussing with my friend about, I mean, what's next. I mean, if there's something that we can do. I mean, she's of a highly influential position in Mexico and Latin America, but and certainly there's a strong interest to promote, to voice out these ideas, not only by her being a person of influence, but also from the artists. They really want these ideas to be heard and these expressions to be heard. But I do realize that difficulties with it because, I mean, what I found is a highly conceptual works, deeply intellectual works. And these are work that require some sort of like education, especially if you want to translate it into an Asian audience, because naturally the audience here is not necessarily aware or familiar with the 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 this kind of like dynamics, social dynamics that happen the other side of the world, and there's nobody to blame. It's just, I mean, it's too far. Mexico is too far it's too far and too small to be taught, for example, in a school. So, and I learned that when I did the exhibition for the Spanish artists, that you need to find that point of dialogue where artists from one particular region can dialogue visually with the audience in another one, and I think that's going to be the challenge, to try to find that connecting point. And certainly the visual aesthetic is one, and I think it is, because I mean, movies like Coco from Pixar, Disney, have really, and many other ones, Frida Kahlo and so on, have really positioned the Mexican aesthetic of art. Then is to continue working on that idea, and it's going to take time. I realize that, but I'm committed. I think I invite everybody to explore Mexican culture for what it is, not for what it looks like. The indigenous aesthetic of Mexico, which is widely celebrated, Dia de Muertos and so on. Try to understand it from where it comes, that the people there pushing for that equal representation and pushing hard, and they're finding a voice through arts. That will be a beautiful exercise to do, to work on. So yeah, let's see if we can continue to push this narrative through, and then eventually do a show, an exhibition, or even a talk or something. I mean, we have ideas with my friend, but we have to be patient. And that was my trip to Oaxaca. And this is me from the future. And I really wanted to edit the video and share it with you, pretty much to kind of like present my perspective and everything that I have learned. It was very eye-opening trip. It was beyond what I was expecting. I really hope it gives you some insights of sort of development that are happening pretty much at the other side of the world. I realized that majority of my audience is in Asia, so I wanted to present that perspective of what goes in Mexico, in the south of Mexico in particular. And with that, I want to wrap up the video, wishing you all very happy holiday for the holidays that are up right now, and all the best for the year to come. Yeah, indeed, my best wishes for 2023, and I really wish the best for all of you. And I hope to see you soon. Okay, bye.